Welcome to Shattered Ties, where trust is broken, loyalties are tested, and hidden betrayals come to light. Here, we uncover the darkest sides of family, friendship, and love, stories of deception, greed, revenge, and the quiet pursuit of justice. So sit back, listen closely, and step into a world where every shattered bond leaves a scar. There is a specific joy that belongs exclusively to soldiers coming home. It isn't complicated. It doesn't require explanation to anyone who has felt it. It is the joy of ordinary things, the particular smell of American air when the plane door opens, the weight of civilian clothes after months of uniform, the specific quality of silence that exists in places where nobody is trying to kill you. It is the joy of a cup of coffee made exactly the way you want it, in your own kitchen, at whatever hour you choose. Ryan Walker had been thinking about that kitchen for 14 months. Not constantly. There had been stretches, operations, long nights, the specific focused present tense that combat requires, when the kitchen had not been in his mind at all. But in the margins of those 14 months, in the early mornings before the base came fully awake, and in the particular dead hours of late watch, he had thought about it. The kitchen of the house he had bought 23 months ago, saved for across 5 years of extra shifts and careful math, the first real property he had ever owned. It was a modest house. He knew that. 900 square feet in a neighborhood that was not fashionable but was solid, good bones, a yard that needed work, a kitchen with a window that faced east so the morning light came straight in. He had stood in that kitchen on the day he got the keys and looked at the light coming through the east window and thought, "This is mine." Nobody in his family had owned property before. He was 31 years old and he had done it alone, through discipline and overtime, and the specific stubbornness of a man who had decided very young that poverty was a condition to be solved rather than endured. He had stood in the kitchen with the morning light and he had thought, "I earned this." 14 months later, on a Thursday afternoon in October, he landed at Atlanta Hartsfield with a duffel bag and a heart full of that specific joy and the full intention of unlocking his front door before the sun went down. He rented a car. He drove. He noticed the mailbox first. Different name on it. He thought, wrong house. He checked the address against the number he had memorized so thoroughly he saw it in his sleep, 4412 Brennan Street. He looked at the mailbox again. Different name. He looked at the house. Same house? His house. The porch he had painted in July, 2 summers ago, the specific green he had chosen because it looked right with the brick. The east-facing window in the kitchen, visible from the driveway. The yard he had been planning to fix still needed work. Same work, which was somehow the most disorienting detail, that the yard still needed the same work he had been planning to do when he got back. He sat in the rental car in front of his house. He thought, there is an explanation. He got out. He walked to the door. He knocked because there was a different name on the mailbox, and that seemed to warrant a knock rather than a key, which he had with him, which he did not use. The door opened. A woman in her 30s, dark hair, holding a dish towel. Behind her, the interior of the house, different furniture, different everything. A child's drawings taped to the wall at the end of the hallway where he had put a mirror. She looked at him, with the polite confusion of someone encountering an unexpected person on their porch. "Can I help you?" she said. And before he could answer, a little girl appeared at the woman's side, 4, maybe 5, with the fearless curiosity of that age, and looked up at him with large eyes and said, "Why is a stranger at our door?" He stood on the porch of his house. He looked at the woman and the child and the drawings on the wall inside and the different furniture and all of it, and said, "I'm sorry. I think there may be a mistake. I own this house." The woman's expression shifted, not hostile, something more careful. "This is our house," she said, not unkindly, the tone of someone stating something they are certain of. "We've lived here for 6 months." He said, "I'm sorry, I've been deployed. I've been overseas. I think there may be some kind of error with the—" "Are you Ryan Walker?" she said. He stopped. "The previous owner," she said. "We bought this house from—" She stopped herself, looked at him more carefully, looked at his posture, his haircut, the duffel bag on the porch. Something in her expression changed. "Oh," she said, very quietly. The little girl was still looking at him with her large eyes. "I think," the woman said carefully, "you need to talk to the county clerk's office." He sat in the county clerk's office for 2 hours. The building was the specific beige of municipal architecture, fluorescent lit, with the ambient smell of paper and bureaucratic patience. The clerk who helped him was a man named Gerald, who had the manner of someone who had been delivering difficult information across a counter for long enough that he had developed a specific neutral kindness for it. Not cold, not warm, just steady. Gerald looked up the address. He turned the screen so Ryan could see it. Property at 4412 Brennan Street. Owner of record, Martin and Susan Cho. Purchase date, April 14th. Sale price, $240,000. Previous owner of record, Ryan Daniel Walker. Transfer of title, April 12th. Ryan looked at the screen. He looked at the date. April 12th. He had been in Kandahar province on April 12th. He could tell Gerald the exact coordinates if Gerald wanted them. He had been in Afghanistan on April 12th, and on every day for 6 months preceding it, and 4 months following it, and his signature was apparently on a property transfer document dated April 12th. Is there any possibility of an error, Ryan said, in the filing? Gerald looked at the screen. He looked at the documents he had pulled up. He looked at Ryan with the steady kindness of a man about to say something that isn't going to help. The filing is complete, Gerald said. Power of attorney transfer. The attorney in fact signed on behalf of the owner of record. He paused. Were you aware you had a power of attorney on file? Ryan was very still. No, he said. Gerald looked at him. Mr. Walker, he said carefully, you may want to speak with a lawyer. Ryan sat in the plastic chair across from Gerald's counter and looked at the property records on the screen that said his house had been sold on a day when he was 6,000 miles away, and thought about who had power of attorney over his life. He had never given anyone power of attorney. He was certain of this. He drove to a hotel. He did not go to his parents' house. Not yet. He needed to understand what he was looking at before he stood in front of the people he suspected, because he had spent 14 months in environments where walking into something without intelligence got people killed, and that instinct did not turn off when he crossed back into civilian life. He needed to know exactly what had happened. The documents arrived by email the following morning. He had requested the complete transfer file from the county clerk, all of it, every page, the full record. Gerald had processed the request with the efficient kindness of someone who understood the weight of what he was handling. The email came at 7:15. Ryan was already awake. He had not slept well. The hotel room had the specific quality of a space that was nobody's, which he had thought would be restful, and had not been. He opened the file. 43 pages. He read all of them. The power of attorney document was page 7. It was, visually, a legitimate document. The correct form, the correct language, the correct structure. It named Deborah Ann Walker as attorney-in-fact for Ryan Daniel Walker, with authority to manage, transfer, and sell real property on his behalf. It was signed, at the bottom, by Ryan Daniel Walker. He looked at his signature. He had a specific signature. He had developed it over years, a clean R, then a compressed arch for the Y, then a long diagonal slash that covered the Walker. He knew it the way you know your own face. He had signed thousands of documents with it. He knew exactly what it looked like. He looked at the signature on page 7. It was close. It was very close. But it was not his. The R was slightly too tall. The arch of the Y was the wrong angle. Whoever had made this signature had looked at his signature and reproduced it carefully enough that a clerk processing a routine transfer would not have stopped, but not carefully enough that Ryan Walker, looking at it on a hotel bed in October, could mistake it for his own. He turned to the next page. The notarization, a seal and a signature from a notary public. The date, March 28th. The location field, Dalton, Georgia, his hometown. He turned to the sale agreement. Page 11. His signature again, on the seller's line. He turned to page 19. The deed transfer. His signature. Page 23. The wire transfer authorization. His signature. He went through the entire 43 pages and found his signature on 11 of them, and not one of them was his. And someone in Dalton, Georgia had stood in front of a notary public and signed his name on documents that transferred the ownership of his house and the money from its sale while he was in Afghanistan. He sat on the hotel bed. He thought about his mother. He thought about her voice on the last phone call before he deployed. Be safe. I love you. I'll take care of the house. Don't worry about anything here. Just focus on coming home. He thought about the power of attorney document and who would have thought to create one, and who would have had access to examples of his signature, and who lived in Dalton, Georgia. He thought about Ashley. He thought about the specific quality of his family's financial history, the loans that were never loans, the emergencies that were always someone else's crisis for Ryan to solve, the particular dynamic of a family that had always treated his stability as a communal resource, and his boundaries as personal failings. He thought about all of it. He sat on the hotel bed for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called Marcus Trent, a lawyer in Atlanta whose card had been given to him by another soldier 3 years ago with the words, "If you ever need someone who doesn't lose." Marcus answered on the third ring. Ryan said, "I need to talk to you today. Someone forged my signature and sold my house while I was deployed." A pause. Marcus said, "Come in this morning, I'll clear my schedule." Marcus was a compact, direct man in his mid-50s who had spent 20 years doing exactly the kind of work this required: financial fraud, property crime, the legal landscape of people who had been robbed by the people closest to them. He had a corner office and a reputation, and the specific energy of someone who found injustice genuinely offensive rather than professionally interesting. He read through the documents Ryan had brought. He read them carefully, all 43 pages, with the focused attention of a man who has learned that documents contain more than their surface. He set the last page down. He looked at Ryan. "The signatures are forgeries," he said. It was not a question. "Yes, you were deployed when these were executed. I have my service records. I can place myself in Kandahar on every date on those documents." Marcus nodded. He picked up page 7 again, the power of attorney. He looked at the notarization. "This notary," he said, "the seal and signature here." He turned the page toward Ryan. "Do you know who this is?" Ryan looked at the name below the seal. Margaret Howell, Notary Public, Whitfield County, Georgia. He did not recognize the name. "No," he said. "Dalton's in Whitfield County," Marcus said. "I'm going to have someone run this notary down. There are a few possibilities here. Either this notary was complicit, which carries its own consequences, or the notary was deceived, which carries different ones, or," he paused, "or the seal itself is forged, which would add a layer to the fraud but wouldn't change the fundamental picture." He set the page down. He looked at Ryan. "Who had access to your personal information?" he said. "Signature samples. Your social security number, that would have been needed for the title transfer. Banking information." Ryan looked at the table. "My mother," he said. Marcus let that sit. "She was managing the property while I was deployed," Ryan said. "Mail, utilities. She had my account information for the utility payments." He paused. "She knew where I kept documents." "Did she have a key to your house?" "Yes." Marcus wrote something down. "Did you give anyone power of attorney?" he said. "No." "Have you had any contact with her since you returned?" "No, I went to the house first, then the clerk's office, then here." Marcus nodded slowly. He closed the folder. "All right," he said. "Here's what we know. Your house was sold using a fraudulent power of attorney, executed with forged signatures, notarized in your hometown. $240,000 changed hands. That money went somewhere." He paused. "I'm going to find out where." Ryan looked at him. "How long?" Ryan said. "Give me 48 hours, Marcus said. "Before you talk to anyone in your family. Can you do that?" Ryan thought about his mother's voice on the phone. "I'll take care of everything, don't worry, just come home." "Yes," he said. He stood up. He shook Marcus's hand. He walked out of the office into the Atlanta afternoon and stood on the sidewalk and felt the specific cold clarity of a man who has identified the target and is now in the phase of operations that requires patience rather than action. 48 hours. He could wait 48 hours. He had waited 14 months. He drove back to the hotel. He sat on the bed. He thought about a notary seal from Dalton, Georgia, on a document that was a crime. And he thought about who in Dalton, Georgia his mother might know well enough to ask for a favor that large. And he thought about the morning light through the east kitchen window that belonged to someone else now. He sat with all of it. Outside, Atlanta moved through its afternoon. He was home. This was not what home was supposed to feel like, but it was what it felt like. And he was going to understand why completely before he walked through his parents' front door and looked his mother in the eye. He owed himself that much. He had earned at least that much. He waited the 48 hours. He spent them at the hotel, mostly. He went for runs in the early mornings, the specific long runs of a man who needs to move his body through something his mind can't resolve by sitting still. He ate at a diner 2 blocks from the hotel, where the coffee was bad and nobody knew him. He read the documents again, several times, not because they contained anything new, but because he needed to know them completely, the way he had always prepared for operations, reading the intelligence until the information was inside him rather than in front of him. On the second evening, Marcus called. Ryan answered before the second ring. The money, Marcus said, was wired in 3 transfers over 4 days. First transfer, $80,000. Second, $90,000. Third, the remaining balance after fees and commission. A pause. All 3 transfers went to the same account. Ryan waited. The account belongs to Trevor Collins, Marcus said. Ryan knew the name. Ashley's husband. He had met Trevor 4 times, at Ashley's wedding 6 years ago, at 2 family Christmases, and once at a barbecue where Trevor had spent 45 minutes explaining a business opportunity that Ryan had declined to invest in, politely, and Trevor had not quite forgiven him for it. Trevor Collins, Ryan said. The account had significant activity in the weeks before the transfers, Marcus said. I've requested the full transaction history. What I can tell you now is that there were multiple large outgoing payments in the months preceding, the pattern of someone managing debt to multiple creditors. The incoming transfers from your house sale arrived and were dispersed within 72 hours. A pause. This money was already spoken for before it arrived. Ryan sat on the hotel bed. He thought about his mother wiring money. He thought about her sitting at a kitchen table in Dalton, Georgia, doing the arithmetic of someone paying off her daughter's debts with her son's house. Ryan, Marcus said, I want you to understand the full picture here before you go to that house. What your mother did, the forged power of attorney, the fraudulent signatures, the property transfer, that's not a civil matter only. What we're looking at is wire fraud, identity theft, forgery of legal documents, and potentially conspiracy if Ashley and Trevor had knowledge of or participated in the scheme. He paused. This is federal territory. The FBI has jurisdiction over wire fraud across state lines. I understand, Ryan said. I need you to not go into that house angry, Marcus said. I need you to go in and observe and let them talk. Can you do that? Ryan thought about 14 months in environments where his discipline had been the difference between outcomes. Yes, he said. Good, Marcus said. I'll have a full report for you tomorrow morning. Go tonight. Ryan thanked him. He put on his jacket. He drove to Dalton. His parents' house was a 40-minute drive north, the same house he had grown up in, a 2-story colonial on a street that had been working class when he was a child and had declined slightly since. The porch light was on. His father's truck was in the driveway. Beside it, a vehicle he did not recognize. An SUV. New, he could tell from the lot where he parked across the street, the clean lines of something recently off a lot, the shine of paint that hadn't had time to dull. He did not recognize the model immediately, so he took out his phone and looked it up when he was parked. A model that started at $54,000. He sat with that for a moment. Then he got out and walked to the front door. He knocked. A long pause. He heard movement inside, the specific quality of movement that happens when people are deciding whether to answer, which has a different sound than the movement of people simply coming to the door. His mother opened it. She was 61 now, smaller than he remembered in the way that parents sometimes get smaller when you have been away long enough. She was wearing an apron, which meant she had been in the kitchen, and she looked at him with an expression that he catalogued carefully. Surprise, yes, but not complete surprise. The surprise of someone who had known this moment was coming and had been waiting for it while hoping it wouldn't. Ryan, she said. Hey, Mom. She pulled him into a hug. He let her. He hugged her back with the automatic muscle memory of a son, and he stood in the doorway of his parents' house, and over her shoulder, he could see his father at the end of the hallway, standing very still, and he noted his father's expression before Harold Walker had time to arrange it. The expression of a man who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has just had the weight increase. Come in, his mother said. Are you hungry? I'm fine, he said. He walked in. The house was the same and slightly different, some new furniture in the living room, a painting on the wall he didn't recognize. His father came down the hallway and shook his hand with the firm grip of a man, substituting physical confidence for the eye contact he wasn't making. Good to have you home, son, Harold said. Ryan looked at him. Thanks, Dad. They sat in the living room. His mother brought coffee without asking, which she had always done, which on any other day would have been comfort, and on this day was information about the performance being constructed around him. How was the flight? His mother said. Fine. You must be exhausted. I'm okay. His father was looking at the television, which was off. He was looking at the dark screen, the way people look at something that gives them an excuse not to look at something else. Ryan drank his coffee. He looked around the room with the methodical attention he had trained over years, not obviously, not in the sweeping way that announces itself, but the soldier's peripheral inventory of a space. He noted the new side table, the lamp that was not the lamp that had been there when he left, the small details of a household that had received an infusion of money at some point in the recent past. He heard a door upstairs. Footsteps on the stairs. Ashley appeared in the living room doorway. She was 27, 4 years younger than Ryan, with their mother's face and a quality of studied ease that she had perfected over years of being the child who did not have to try hard at anything because someone would always catch her. She was wearing clothes he did not recognize, not the style of her he remembered, which had been casual, comfortable, vaguely harried. These were different. New quality. The specific look of someone who has recently upgraded their relationship with what they wear. She looked at him. "Ryan," she said. Something moved across her face. Not guilt exactly. Something more complicated, the expression of someone who has been rehearsing a version of this encounter and is finding the real version harder to manage. "Ashley," he said. "When did you get back?" "Yesterday." "We didn't know," she stopped. "Mom didn't say. I wanted to surprise everyone." A pause. The word surprise in the room with the particular weight he had given it. "It's really good to see you," Ashley said. She crossed the room and hugged him, and he let her. And over her shoulder, he looked at his mother, and his mother was looking at her coffee cup. Ashley pulled back. She sat on the couch. Ryan looked at her hands. A bracelet, gold, substantial, not the kind of thing Ashley had worn before. He looked at it for 1 second and then looked away. "How's Trevor?" he said. "Good," she said. "He's good. He's got a new project he's excited about." "Good," Ryan said. The conversation moved through the standard channels. How was the deployment? Was he okay? What were his plans now? His mother asked questions. His father said occasional words. Ashley answered things that hadn't been asked of her, which was a habit she'd always had, and which now had a specific texture to it, the conversational filling of someone who needed the room not to be quiet. Ryan answered everything calmly. He drank his coffee. He looked at the room. He noted the renovated kitchen visible through the doorway, the new backsplash tile, the countertop that was not the countertop he remembered. He noted the quality of the appliances visible from where he sat. He noted all of it with the quiet totality of a man who has been given 48 hours to prepare and has used them. At 9:30, he said he was tired and needed to get back to the hotel. His mother looked at him. Something in her expression, the specific look of someone realizing the conversation they had been afraid of had not happened yet, and was therefore still coming. "You're staying at a hotel," she said. "For now," he said, "until I figure out some things." A pause. "Of course," she said. "Come for dinner tomorrow, we'll." His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Marcus, a text. Account confirmed. $237,400 transferred to Trevor Collins' account between April 14-17. Ashley Walker Collins co-signatory on account. Both had knowledge of incoming funds. He read it. He put his phone in his pocket. He stood up. He said goodnight. He hugged his mother. He shook his father's hand. He nodded at his sister. He walked to his rental car in the dark, and he sat in it for a moment before starting the engine. And he looked at the house with its porch light on, and the new SUV in the driveway, and the renovated kitchen visible through the window. And he thought about $237,000. He thought about extra shifts. He thought about 5 years of careful math. He thought about the morning light through the east kitchen window. He started the car. He drove back to the hotel. He called Marcus. "Tomorrow," Ryan said. "I want to go back tomorrow and talk to her directly. I want her to say it." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I understand, just remember." "I know," Ryan said. "I need her to say it. I need to hear it from her." A pause. "All right," Marcus said. "Let her talk. Don't fill the silences. Let her explain it in her own words." Another pause. "Whatever she says, and Ryan, she's going to say things that are hard to hear. Whatever she says, I need you to stay in the room." Ryan looked at the hotel room ceiling. "I'll stay in the room," he said. He ended the call. He lay in the dark. He thought about the specific discipline required to sit in a room and listen to the explanation for the worst thing someone had ever done to you. And he thought about 14 months of discipline in environments that required it under far more extreme conditions. And he thought, "I can do this. I can do this one more time." He went back the next morning. Alone. He had thought about bringing Marcus and decided against it. This conversation needed to happen without the formal structure of legal presence, because formal structure would give his mother something to manage, and he needed her without the management. He needed her unmediated. He knocked. She answered quickly. She had been expecting him. She was dressed, composed, the version of herself she presented when she needed to be taken seriously. "Ryan," she said. "Can we talk?" he said. "Of course," she stepped back. "Come in." His father was not home. He noted this. Harold's truck was gone. He did not know whether his father had been asked to leave or had left of his own instinct, But either way, the house was quieter without him, and he thought his mother had probably arranged it. Ashley was not there either. Just the two of them. They sat in the kitchen, at the new countertop, on the new bar stools, in the newly tiled room that had been paid for with his money. He did not say this. He looked at the kitchen and sat down. His mother set coffee in front of him. He did not drink it. He looked at her. "Tell me about the house," he said. She looked at her own coffee. A long pause. The kind of pause that has already decided on an answer and is working out how to deliver it. "I was going to tell you," she said. "When you got back, I was going to explain everything." He waited. "Ashley was in trouble," she said. "Real trouble, Ryan, not like before." She looked up at him. $180,000. The people she owed, these weren't banks. These were people who were going to hurt Trevor, possibly Ashley. Her voice was controlled but had something underneath it, genuine fear, remembered. "I didn't have options. We didn't have options." "You had options," Ryan said. "We don't have that kind of money. There are options between doing nothing and forging your son's name on legal documents," he said. She looked at her coffee. "The house was sitting empty," she said. "You were overseas. Nobody was living there, I thought." "It wasn't sitting empty," Ryan said. "It was mine. I was living there before I deployed and I was going to live there when I came back. That's not sitting empty. That's someone being somewhere else temporarily." His mother was quiet. "How did you do the documents?" he said. "Walk me through it." She looked up. Something in her expression, the calculation of whether honesty was better strategy than deflection. The specific algebra of a woman who has been managing situations for decades and is trying to determine which approach produces the best outcome here. She had apparently decided on honesty, or a version of it. "Margaret Howell," she said. "She's been our notary for 30 years. I've done documents with her for she knows our family. I told her you had given verbal authorization and that the paperwork was a formality, that you were overseas and couldn't be reached easily." Ryan looked at her. "You told her I verbally authorized it. She's an older woman. She's been doing notarizations for." "You manipulated an elderly woman into participating in a federal crime," Ryan said, quietly. His mother's hands tightened around her cup. "I was trying to save your sister," she said, "by forging my signature 11 times. I was going to pay you back." "With what?" He kept his voice even. He was very focused on keeping his voice even. "You don't have $240,000. You've never had $240,000. That wasn't a loan you were taking. That was my house. My property. The thing I spent 5 years building so I would have something that was mine." She looked at the table. "Ashley would have lost everything," she said. "Ashley lost everything because Ashley made decisions that lost everything," he said. "That's not my debt. I didn't borrow from loan sharks. I didn't run up what I'm told is over $180,000 in bad debt. Ashley did that. Ashley and Trevor did that. And you decided that the appropriate solution was to reach into my life and take what was mine and give it to them." His mother looked up. "You can build another house," she said. The words landed in the kitchen. He sat with them. He looked at his mother, at the woman who had raised him, who had been at his graduation from basic training with tears on her face, who had called him every 3 weeks during the deployment with the specific worry of a mother who understood that the calls might stop. And he looked at her saying, "You can build another house," and understood, with complete and final clarity, something he had been avoiding understanding for 31 years. She had always thought he was replaceable. Not him specifically, not as a son, but his resources, his stability, his ability to absorb losses and recover. She had always treated those things as communal property, as assets she could draw on. Because he was Ryan and Ryan handled things, and Ryan would figure it out, and Ashley needed protecting. It had never been about malice. It had never been about hating him. It was something worse than that. It was being so certain he would be fine that his harm didn't require weight. "I did it to save your sister," she said. The sentence that explained everything and excused nothing. He looked at her. He looked at the kitchen around him. His money, in the tile and the countertop and the appliances. His 5 years of extra shifts materialized into a kitchen that was not his, in a house that was not his, serving a debt that was not his. He picked up his phone. He looked at it for a moment. Then he set it on the counter between them and pressed play on the recording application that Marcus had told him to activate before he walked in. His mother looked at the phone. She looked at him. He watched her understand. "Everything you just said," he said, "is now part of a legal record." He stood up. "My lawyer will be in touch. Don't discuss this with Ashley or Trevor or Dad before talking to your own attorney." He paused. You should probably get one today. She said nothing. She sat in the kitchen he had paid for, at the counter he had paid for, and she said nothing. He walked to the door. He opened it. Ryan, her voice behind him. Something in it he hadn't heard before, not the management, not the explanation. Something more stripped down than that. He stopped, he did not turn around. I thought you'd understand, she said. Eventually, I thought when you knew, I thought you'd understand that I didn't have a choice. He stood in the doorway. He thought about a little girl, asking why a stranger was on her porch. He thought about Gerald in the county clerk's office, turning the screen so he could read the date. He thought about his signature, 11 times, on documents he had never seen. You had a choice, he said. He walked out. The door closed behind him. He stood on the porch, his mother's porch, not his, which he would not be standing on again. And he breathed the October air, and he thought about the recording on his phone, and what Marcus would do with it, and what came next. And he felt the specific cold clarity of a man who has crossed from the phase of understanding into the phase of action. He had what he needed. He walked to the car. He called Marcus as he drove. I have it, he said. Full confession. She confirmed the notary, the documents, the wire transfers, the intent. He paused. She said she did it to save her daughter. A silence. Ryan, Marcus said. I need you to know what you have on that recording, combined with the financial records we already have. This is significant. This is a very strong case. I know, Ryan said. Are you okay? He drove north on the highway, away from Dalton, away from the porch and the new kitchen and the SUV and all of it. He thought about whether he was okay. No, he said honestly, but I know what I'm doing. It was the truest thing he could say. He drove. Behind him, his mother sat in her kitchen. Ahead of him, there was work to do. He had been trained for work. He focused on what was ahead. Ashley called on Saturday morning. He saw her name on the screen and let it ring. She called again 20 minutes later. He let that one ring too. The third call came while he was eating breakfast at the diner, and he set his phone face down on the table and finished his eggs and thought about what Ashley calling 3 times in one morning meant, and what his mother had told her, and how much of the recording she knew about. The fourth call was his father. He answered that one. Harold Walker was not a man who called. In 31 years, Ryan could count on one hand the number of times his father had initiated a phone call to him. The calls had always gone the other way. Ryan to his parents. Ryan checking in. Ryan maintaining the connective tissue of a family that would have let it dissolve without his effort. His father calling on a Saturday morning was its own kind of information. Your mother wants everyone to come to the house, Harold said. Sunday, she wants to talk. Talk about what? A pause, about the situation. Ryan ate a piece of toast. I'll be there, he said. Sunday had the quality of a trial that had been organized by the defendant. His mother had set the dining room table, the good table, the one that came out for Thanksgiving and Christmas and occasions that required the performance of family unity. There was food. She had cooked, which was what his mother did when she needed to establish the domestic frame, the frame that said, this is a family, this is a home, we are people who eat together and work things out. Ryan arrived at 1 o'clock. Ashley and Trevor were already there. Trevor was a broad man in his late 30s, with the specific quality of someone who has spent years being the most confident person in rooms that didn't require much confidence, and who had the look, today, of someone whose confidence had taken a significant structural hit. He nodded at Ryan. Ryan nodded back. Ashley looked at him with the expression she'd had since childhood, when something was her fault, and she needed it not to be, the expression of someone who has already built the argument that rearranges the facts into a different shape. His father was at the table. His mother came from the kitchen carrying a dish and set it down and looked at Ryan and said, sit down, sweetheart. He sat. He put his phone in his jacket pocket. He turned on the recording application. He had told Marcus he was going. Marcus had said, don't argue. Let them say what they're going to say. Let the room produce what the room is going to produce. Ryan had said he understood. He sat at the good table in the dining room and looked at his family arranged around it, and thought about all the years of this table and what it had meant, and what it meant now. His mother sat. She folded her hands. She looked at Ryan with the expression of a woman about to deliver a prepared position. I want us to talk about this like a family, she said. Not like, she paused, choosing the word, adversaries. Ryan said nothing. What happened was complicated, she said. And I know Ryan is upset. I understand that. But I need everyone to understand the full picture. She looked around the table. Ashley was in real danger. The people she owed money to were not. This was not a situation where we could just wait and see. These were people who were going to hurt her. She looked at Ryan. I made a decision, she said. It wasn't the right decision, I know that. But I made it to protect your sister, and I need you to understand that. Ryan looked at the table. He said nothing. Ashley leaned forward. Ryan, her voice had the specific quality of someone who has rehearsed sincerity and is deploying it. I know this is hard, and I know you're angry, but you have to understand what we were going through. We were terrified. Mom didn't have options. We didn't have options. There are always options, Ryan said. Not with this kind of debt. Trevor, from beside Ashley, his voice had the injured quality of a man who has decided he is the victim of the consequences of his own decisions. You don't know what these people were like. You don't know what they said they'd do. Ryan looked at Trevor. You borrowed from loan sharks, Ryan said. Trevor's jaw tightened. Trevor made mistakes, Ashley said quickly. We both made mistakes, but that doesn't mean we deserved what was happening to us. No, Ryan said. It doesn't. But it also doesn't mean I deserve to come home from 14 months in Afghanistan to find out my house was gone. A silence. You can buy another house, Ashley said. He looked at his sister. She said it with the complete genuineness of someone who believed it, not as cruelty, not as dismissal, but as a sincere statement of what she thought was true. She believed, had always believed, that Ryan's capacity to absorb and recover was simply a fact of nature, like weather, something that existed independently of cost or effort. Ashley, he said, I saved for 5 years. I worked extra shifts for 5 years. I bought that house before I deployed because I wanted to have something that was mine when I came back. He kept his voice level. Do you understand what 5 years of extra shifts looks like? Do you have any idea? She looked at the table. She's your sister, his mother said. He turned to his mother. She is, he said. And you're my mother. And he looked at Harold, is my father. I know who everyone is, that's not in question. His mother's expression shifted, settling into the argument she had prepared, the version that had been working in the family for 31 years. The version that had always, eventually, worked on Ryan. Family comes first, she said. That's what I raised you to believe. When family is in trouble, family comes first, Ryan said. Okay, where were you when I was working double shifts to save for that house? Where was family then? Where was family when I was deployed and nobody, not one person at this table, called to ask if I needed anything, if my finances were okay, if my property was being maintained? He paused. Where was family when a decision was being made that would destroy 14 months of my work and come home to nothing? Nobody spoke. Family comes first when it's Ashley who needs something, Ryan said. That's what you mean. That's the specific version of family comes first that operates in this house. His mother's face had the expression of someone whose argument has encountered a counter-argument it wasn't built for. You've always been the strong one, she said. You've always been able to handle things. Being able to handle things isn't the same as it being okay to make me handle things I didn't choose, Ryan said. We're not saying what happened was right, Ashley said. We're just saying it's done. You can be angry, but the thing to do now is figure out how to move forward as a family. Not lawyers and recordings and… Ryan looked at his sister. Recordings, he said. Ashley stopped. He saw it happen, the understanding crossing her face that their mother had told her about the phone, that she had just told him that she knew. The room had gone very still. Ryan looked at his mother. His mother was looking at the table. He looked at his father. Harold Walker was looking at his hands. The specific quality of a man holding still under scrutiny. Ryan had seen this before, in interrogation contexts, in situations where someone who knew more than they were saying was trying to produce the body language of someone who didn't. Ryan looked at his father for a long moment. Dad, he said. Harold didn't look up. Did you know, Ryan said. A silence. Harold's hands on the table, his coffee cup, his stillness. Harold, his mother's voice, a warning brief. Harold looked up. He looked at Ryan. And Ryan saw it in his father's face. Before Harold could arrange it, before the management came back up, he saw it. The specific expression of a man who has been carrying a specific thing for a specific number of months and is exhausted by the weight of it. I found out after, Harold said. After it was done. After the money was all ready, I found out, and she said there was nothing to be done, and I thought… He stopped. I thought by the time you got back it would be sorted. How would it have been sorted? Ryan said. Harold had no answer. Ryan looked at his father, at this man who had stood on the platform at his basic training graduation with tears on his face, who had shaken his hand, and said, I'm proud of you, son, with the specific emotion of a father seeing something become real. And he thought about all the years of Harold Walker's silence, All the situations Harold had observed and not intervened in. All the things Harold had let happen by the simple mechanism of not saying anything. "You knew," Ryan said. "And you didn't call me. You didn't write. You let me spend 4 more months overseas thinking I had a house to come back to." Harold looked at the table. "I'm sorry, son," he said. Ryan sat with those 3 words. He sat with them for a long moment. Then he stood up. "I'm going to be honest with all of you," he said. "Not to be cruel, just because I think you should know where things stand." He looked at his mother. "What you did isn't a family disagreement. It isn't something we're going to sit around a table and resolve. You forged my signature on 11 legal documents. You defrauded a notary public. You transferred property that belonged to me through a fraudulent power of attorney." He looked at Ashley and Trevor. "The money went to an account you both had access to. That makes you part of this." He looked at his father. "You knew and said nothing for 4 months. That has its own implications." He picked up his jacket. "Get lawyers," he said. "All of you, good ones." Ashley started to say something. "Ashley," he looked at her, "don't." She stopped. He walked to the door. His mother said his name, just his name, the way she had said it his entire life. The specific sound of it in her voice that he had always responded to, that had always, one way or another, brought him back. He opened the door. He walked out. "Marcus called on Tuesday. I need you to come in," he said. "There are developments you need to hear in person." Ryan drove to Atlanta. He sat across from Marcus in the corner office, and he looked at the folder on the desk, and he waited. Marcus opened it. "The property account we already know about," he said. $240,000. He turned a page. "While I was pulling the financial records for the fraud case, I requested a full audit of accounts associated with your personal information. Social Security, banking credentials, power of attorney scope." He looked up. "Ryan, your mother's access wasn't limited to the house." Ryan was still. "The power of attorney document she created gave her broad financial agency," Marcus said. "Broader than a standard property-specific POA. Either she had helped drafting it, or she did research. The scope of authority she gave herself was significant." He laid 3 pages on the desk in a row. "First account," he said. "Your primary savings, the account you've been contributing to for 6 years. Current balance." He looked at the page, $412. He paused. "Balance 14 months ago when you deployed, $87,000. Ryan looked at the page. "Over the deployment period," Marcus said, "there were 17 withdrawals, structured below reporting thresholds. Total removed, $86,500 and change." He laid a hand on the second page. "Emergency fund account," he said. "Separate institution, you'd built this up over 4 years, the kind of account you keep somewhere separate specifically so it's harder to touch impulsively." A pause. "Balance when you deployed, $41,000. Current balance, 0. He paused. "Cleaned out in 2 transactions in June. Transferred to the same Collins account." Ryan was looking at the pages. He was very still. Marcus placed his hand on the 3rd page. "Investment account," he said. "Brokerage account you opened 4 years ago. Moderate risk portfolio, you'd been building it steadily." He looked at the page. "Value at deployment, approximately $190,000. He looked up. "She liquidated it. Sold the positions over 3 weeks in May, which is why the amounts look different. She was selling off holdings rather than withdrawing cash. Total realized, $181,000 after fees and early liquidation penalties." He set the page down. He looked at Ryan. "Total across all accounts," Marcus said, "including the house sale proceeds, $412,000, approximately." He paused. $412,000, removed from your financial life, over a 14-month deployment. The office was very quiet. Ryan looked at the 3 pages on the desk. He thought about the specific number, $412,000. He thought about what that number represented in time, in extra shifts, in overtime, in the particular discipline of a man from a poor family who had decided poverty was a problem to be solved. He thought about the running calculation he had kept in his head for years, the specific awareness of every dollar and where it was, and what it was doing, and what it was building toward. He thought about all of it being gone, not spent, not lost in the market, not victim of bad luck or poor decisions. Taken by his mother, sitting at a kitchen table in Dalton, Georgia, while he was in Kandahar province. He breathed in. He breathed out. He looked at Marcus. "What are the next steps?" he said. Marcus looked at him for a moment. The look of a man who has delivered devastating news to people before, and is assessing how this particular person is receiving it. "I've been in contact with the FBI," Marcus said. "Financial Crimes Division. Wire fraud across state lines, identity theft, forgery of federal documents, these are federal charges. They've been reviewing the preliminary materials I sent. He paused. They want to meet with you. Ryan nodded. There's more, Marcus said. Ryan waited. The notary, Margaret Howell, I had her interviewed. He opened another page. She's 81 years old. She's been a notary for 40 years. She says your mother came to her in March and told her you had given telephone authorization and that the paperwork was routine. She says your mother has been bringing her documents for 30 years and she trusted her. A pause. She had no idea. Marcus set the page down. She's been notarizing documents for your family since before you were born. Your mother knew exactly who to ask. Ryan thought about an 81-year-old woman who had trusted 30 years of relationship. He thought about his mother, knowing exactly who to ask. He thought about all the people his mother had used in the construction of this. Margaret Howell's trust, Harold's silence, Ashley's need, Trevor's debt, the administrative machinery of a county clerk's office that processed a routine transfer on a document that was a crime. He thought about how many people had been moved across the board. He thought about being in Kandahar while all of it was happening. There was a knock at the office door. Marcus said, "Come in." A woman entered, mid-40s. Efficient, the specific bearing of federal law enforcement in civilian clothes. She had a folder under her arm and a badge at her hip, and the manner of someone who has done this many times and has decided that directness is the most respectful approach. "Mr. Walker," she said, "I'm Special Agent Dana Reyes, FBI Financial Crimes. I've been assigned to your case." She sat down across from him and opened her folder. "I want to tell you that what we've reviewed so far is significant. The pattern of transactions, the documentation, the interstate wire transfers, this is a substantial federal case." She looked at him steadily. "I also want to tell you that cases like this take time to prosecute correctly. I want you to be prepared for that." "I understand," Ryan said. "We'll need your full cooperation, depositions, documentation, access to your service records to establish your whereabouts on specific dates." She paused. "Do you have any questions before we begin?" Ryan looked at her. He thought about 14 months. He thought about a little girl asking why a stranger was on her porch. He thought about $412,000 and an 81-year-old woman and a recording on his phone and his mother's voice saying, "I did it to save your sister." He thought about all of it, and he thought about what Marcus had told him from the beginning. The circumstances matter to a judge considerably. "No questions," he said. Agent Reyes reached into her folder. She placed a business card on the desk between them. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Walker," she said. "Very soon." Ryan picked up the card. He looked at it. He put it in his pocket. Outside the corner office, Atlanta moved through its Tuesday afternoon. Ordinary, unhurried. The specific indifference of a city that contains multitudes of situations like this one and continues regardless. Ryan sat in the chair and breathed and thought about the long work ahead and felt, underneath the grief and the rage, and the specific exhaustion of a man who has been fighting in one way or another for 14 months, and has come home to find that the fighting wasn't finished. A different feeling. Something cold and focused and patient. Something that knew how to wait. Something that had been trained for exactly this. The federal courthouse in Atlanta was everything the county clerk's office was not. Where the clerk's office had been beige and patient and unhurried, the federal courthouse had the specific weight of a building that understood its own authority, marble floors, high ceilings, the particular acoustics of spaces designed to make words land with consequence. Ryan had been in buildings like this before, in a different context, in the institutional spaces of the military, where architecture was used to communicate that the proceedings within it mattered. He arrived early. He sat in the hallway outside courtroom 4B and drank bad coffee from a paper cup and watched lawyers move through the corridor with the focused energy of people who had prepared extensively and were now in the execution phase. He thought about preparation. He thought about the 6 months between his conversation with Agent Reyes and this morning, the depositions, the document reviews, the specific painstaking work of building a federal case from the materials he and Marcus and the FBI had assembled. He had been present for all of it. He had answered every question. He had sat in rooms and gone through records, and identified his forged signature on 11 documents so many times that the specific wrongness of those signatures, the R too tall, the arch of the Y at the wrong angle, had become as familiar to him as the original. He had been through it all. Now he sat in the hallway with his bad coffee, and he waited for it to matter. Marcus appeared at 8:45. He sat beside Ryan and opened his briefcase and reviewed something and then looked up. "How are you?" he said. "Ready," Ryan said. Marcus looked at him. "She's going to look at you," he said. "At some point during the proceedings, she's going to look at you. I need you to be prepared for that." Ryan thought about his mother's face. "I'm prepared," he said. Deborah Walker arrived with her defense attorney, a man named Kessler who had the bearing of someone who had reviewed the evidence and understood the position he was in, and had decided that the best available strategy was damage limitation. He had advised her, Marcus had told Ryan, to consider a plea. She had declined. She entered the courtroom in the clothes she wore to church, the specific choice of a woman who understood that appearance was argument, who had always understood that, who had been making arguments through appearance for 61 years. She looked smaller in the courtroom than she had in her kitchen. The architecture was not helping her. She sat. She did not look at Ryan immediately. He watched her, not looking at him the way he had learned to watch things, with peripheral attention, patient, without the forward energy that announces itself. The judge was a man named Caldwell, late 50s, with the economical manner of someone who had presided over enough federal cases to have lost all tolerance for theater and retained full tolerance for substance. The prosecution was led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Patricia Vance, a compact woman in her 40s who had, over 6 months of preparation, reviewed the case materials with Ryan twice, and who had said, at the end of the second meeting, "I want you to know that this case is going to be prosecuted completely." Ryan had believed her. She opened with the facts. Not narrative, not emotion, facts. Dates, amounts, account numbers, the sequence of transactions that had moved $412,000 from Ryan's financial life into the Collins account while he was serving overseas. She laid them out the way you lay out a map, piece by piece, until the full geography was visible. Ryan watched the jury, 12 people who had come into this courtroom without knowing him, without knowing his mother, without the 31 years of context that colored everything for Ryan. They were hearing this as it was, which was its own kind of clarity. He watched them receive the account of the withdrawals. He watched the amount register on face after face, the specific recalibration of people hearing a number larger than they had been expecting. Kessler's opening was what Marcus had predicted, the language of desperation, of a mother's impossible choice, of a family crisis that had produced a terrible decision. He was skilled. He was not wrong about the desperation. The desperation had been real. He was attempting to locate the crime inside the context of that desperation and make the context carry enough weight to reduce the crime. Ryan had thought about this strategy. He understood it. It was not going to work. The documents came first. Prosecution Exhibit 1 through Exhibit 11. The forged signatures, displayed side by side with authenticated samples of Ryan's actual signature from military records. Patricia Vance walked through the comparison methodically. A forensic document examiner had spent 2 days on the stand, 3 weeks before this trial, establishing the analysis in detail that left no technical ambiguity. The signatures were forgeries. The testimony was unambiguous. Exhibit 12, the power of attorney document. The language of its scope, the broad financial authority Deborah had written for herself, broader than standard property POA, specific enough to enable what followed. Exhibit 13 through 24, the wire transfer records, the 3 transfers from the house sale, the 17 savings account withdrawals, the 2 emergency fund transfers, the brokerage liquidations, position by position, over 3 weeks in May. Patricia Vance said, at the end of the financial record presentation, $412,000, removed from the financial life of a man serving in the United States Army in Afghanistan by his mother, using documents she created without his knowledge or consent. She let it sit. Kessler objected to the characterization. Judge Caldwell said, overruled, continue. Margaret Howell took the stand at 2 in the afternoon. She was 81 years old, and she moved to the witness stand with the careful deliberateness of someone who understood that her body required attention and gave it that attention without apology. She had white hair and the specific quality of a woman who had been competent and reliable her entire life, and was in this courtroom because that competence and reliability had been used against her. She sat in the witness chair. She looked at the courtroom. Her eyes found Deborah. Ryan watched that moment, the specific quality of Margaret Howell's eyes finding Deborah Walker across a federal courtroom. It was not anger exactly. It was something older and more settled than anger. The expression of a woman who has had 30 years of trust converted into evidence of a crime and has processed that fact and arrived somewhere on the other side of it. Patricia Vance approached the witness stand. Mrs. Howell, she said, how long have you known the defendant, Deborah Walker? 32 years, Margaret said. Her voice was steady, the voice of someone who had decided to be completely clear. In what capacity? She was a neighbor first, then I would have said a friend, a pause. She brought me documents to notarize over the years, many documents, family things, property things, business things, I notarized them. Did you have any reason, over those 32 years, to question the documents she brought you? No, she was a person I trusted. In March of last year, did the defendant bring you a document to notarize? She did. What did she tell you about that document? Margaret looked at her hands briefly, then back at the courtroom. She told me it was a power of attorney for her son. She said her son was deployed overseas and had given telephone authorization. She said it was a routine matter, that he trusted her to handle his affairs, and that the formality of the notarization was just a legal requirement. A pause. She said he was a good son. The courtroom was quiet. Did you have any reason to doubt her? No, I had no reason. I knew this woman for 32 years. I had notarized documents for her family, for the children's school things, for Harold's business, for Ashley's various things over the years. I believed her. So you notarized the document? I did. Patricia Vance paused. Mrs. Howell, she said, when did you learn that the document was fraudulent? Margaret looked at the table in front of her. When Agent Reyes came to my door, she said. In the spring, she showed me the documents and she asked me about the notarization and she stopped. A breath. I told her what I've just told you, that I had believed Deborah, that I had no idea. Her voice had remained steady through all of it. Until the next sentence. I have been a notary public for 40 years, she said. I have never, in 40 years, I have never had my seal used in the commission of a crime. She paused. I am sorry that I was deceived. I am sorry that my trust in a person I believed to be a friend was used this way. She looked at Deborah. I am sorry for what happened to her son. The room held that for a moment. Kessler's cross-examination of Margaret Howell was brief and carefully limited. He had nothing to gain from pressing an 81-year-old woman who had been defrauded, and he understood this. He established only that she had acted in good faith, which was his point, which was also the prosecution's point, which was not a contradiction. Margaret Howell stepped down from the witness stand. She walked past the defense table. She did not look at Deborah as she passed. The recording came at 4:15. Patricia Vance said, the prosecution would like to play People's Exhibit 31. She pressed play. Ryan's voice first, his own voice, coming through the courtroom speakers, asking his mother to tell him about the house. Then his mother's voice. He had heard the recording many times. He had listened to it in preparation, had listened to it with Marcus, had listened to it in the specific focused way of someone making sure every word was accounted for. He knew it. He was not prepared for how it sounded in this room. The specific quality of a voice in a courtroom has no equivalent. The acoustics, the silence of the audience, the knowledge that every word is being weighed, it makes ordinary speech sound like something being examined under light. His mother's voice in the kitchen that morning, careful and self-justifying and occasionally genuine, came through the speakers and filled the room and was heard by 12 people who had never met her, and by a judge who was taking notes and by Deborah herself, sitting at the defense table, listening to her own words. I was going to tell you, when you got back, Ashley was in trouble, real trouble. The house was sitting empty. And then, near the end, the sentence that Patricia Vance had told Ryan she intended to use as the closing exhibit of the prosecution's case. I did it to save your sister. The recording ended. The courtroom was very quiet. Ryan looked at the table in front of him. He heard, in his peripheral awareness, a sound from the direction of the defense table. A small, compressed sound. The kind of sound a person makes when they are maintaining control with significant effort. He did not look. He had told himself he would not look in that moment, and he kept that. Patricia Vance said, "No further exhibits, Your Honor." Closing arguments came the following morning. Patricia Vance's closing was direct and complete. She walked the jury through the evidence the way you walk someone through a building you know well, room by room, not rushing, making sure every door was opened. The forged documents, the financial records, Margaret Howell's testimony, the recording, the military service records that placed Ryan, in Afghanistan, on every date that mattered. The defense will tell you this was a desperate act by a desperate mother, she said. And they are not wrong that desperation was present. But desperation is not a legal defense against wire fraud, identity theft, and forgery. The law does not have a provision for stealing $400,000 from your son because your daughter is in debt. It does not have that provision, because the existence of that provision would make every son and daughter and spouse and parent in this country vulnerable to the financial emergencies of the people who love them. She paused. Ryan Walker served his country for 14 months. He came home to nothing, because his mother decided that nothing was an acceptable outcome for him. The jury's job is to tell her whether the law agrees. Kessler's closing was skilled and insufficient. He spoke about family and context and the absence of malicious intent. He spoke about a mother's impossible position. He was building the best case available from the materials he had. It was not enough. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Ryan sat in the hallway outside courtroom 4B and drank bad coffee and waited with the patient discipline of a man who had learned that waiting was not passive. Marcus came out of the courtroom at 3:40. "They're back," he said. "Guilty. Wire fraud, identity theft, forgery of legal documents, conspiracy to commit financial fraud," with Ashley Walker Collins and Trevor Collins named as co-conspirators in the civil proceedings to follow. Judge Caldwell read the verdict with the economical manner he brought to everything, no editorial, no emphasis beyond what the words themselves carried, just the verdict in sequence, count by count. "Guilty, guilty, guilty." Ryan sat at the plaintiff's table and listened to each count and felt the specific complicated thing that justice produces when it arrives. Not triumph, not relief exactly, not the clean satisfaction of a wrong corrected, something more textured than that, something that acknowledged what was right and still held what was lost. He looked at his mother. She was looking at the table. She had looked at him twice during the trial. Once on the first day, briefly, the look of a woman trying to read what was in her son's face. Once during the recording, the involuntary look of someone hearing their own words in a room that had changed their meaning completely. She was not looking at him now. She was looking at the table and her hands, and the specific middle distance of a person whose world has been reorganized around them. He looked at her for a moment. He thought about 31 years. He thought about the platform at basic training graduation, her face in the crowd. He thought about, "I'll take care of the house, don't worry about anything." He thought about Margaret Howell saying, "She said he was a good son." He looked at his mother for a moment, and then he looked away. The sentencing hearing was 6 weeks later. 28 months federal prison, full restitution, the $412,000, plus interest, plus legal fees, the complete financial accounting of what had been taken. Judge Caldwell noted the aggravating factor of the defendant's exploitation of military deployment and the targeting of a service member's accounts during active duty. Ashley and Trevor, in the civil proceedings that ran parallel, were found jointly liable for the funds received. Their assets were attached. Their financial situation, already precarious, became something closer to collapse. The bankruptcy Ryan had been told Ashley was trying to avoid arrived anyway, with the additional weight of civil judgment on top of it. The family reputation, in Dalton, Georgia, did what reputations do when federal proceedings become public record. Ryan was told about most of this by Marcus. He did not follow it closely. He had made the decision somewhere around the sentencing hearing to stop monitoring the collapse and start looking forward, because monitoring the collapse was its own kind of staying attached, and he was working, deliberately and carefully, on detachment. He was not all the way there, but he was working on it. The letter was on Marcus's desk. He had come in to sign the final restitution paperwork, the last of the formal documentation, the piece that closed the legal process and began the long financial recovery. Marcus had the paperwork ready. Beside it, a standard white envelope. "This came through the title company," Marcus said. "The buyers, the Cho family. They asked that it be passed to you." Ryan looked at the envelope. His name on the front, handwritten. He picked it up. He opened it. The letter was 2 pages, handwritten from Susan Cho. "Dear Mr. Walker, my husband Martin and I have followed the proceedings in the news. We want you to know that we are deeply sorry for what happened to you. When we purchased the house, we had no knowledge that anything was wrong. The sale appeared completely legitimate. We worked with a realtor. We went through title insurance. We completed all the standard due diligence. We moved our daughter into what we believed was our home in good faith. When we learned the truth, we were devastated, not only because of the legal complications, but because we understood what it meant, that someone had bought our family's home not from its real owner, but from a crime. Martin and I have discussed this extensively. We want to propose something. We would like to sell the property back to you at the price we paid, with no markup and no legal complications between us. We have spoken with our attorney and with the title company. Given the court's declaration of the original sale as fraudulent, there is a pathway to make this happen. We don't want to live in a house that was taken from someone. That's not what we want our home to be. Our daughter asks about you sometimes. She remembers the man who came to our door. I told her you were a soldier who had been away. She said she hoped you found somewhere nice to live. We hope you find somewhere nice to live too. We hope that somewhere is this house, if you want it. Please have your attorney contact ours at the number below. With sincerity, Susan and Martin Cho. Ryan read the letter. He read it twice. He set it down on Marcus's desk and looked at it for a moment. He thought about a little girl asking why a stranger was on her porch. He thought about that same little girl, months later, asking her mother about the soldier who had been away. He thought about the east kitchen window and the morning light and the word, mine, and what it had meant to stand in that kitchen on the day he got the keys. He looked at the letter. He looked at Marcus. Call their attorney, he said. Marcus was already reaching for his phone. The paperwork took 11 weeks. This was faster than Marcus had expected and slower than Ryan had hoped, which was the standard condition of legal processes, and which Ryan had made his peace with during the 6 months of the federal case. He had learned, over the course of the past year, that patience was not the absence of urgency, but the management of it, the discipline of a man who understands that some things move at their own speed, and that pushing them does not make them move faster, only makes the waiting harder. He spent the 11 weeks in the hotel. Not the same hotel, he had moved twice, both times to somewhere slightly more functional, with a small kitchen and a desk and the basic infrastructure of a life being maintained in temporary quarters. He worked. The Army had given him transition leave, and he had used the first months of it for the legal proceedings, and was now using the remainder to figure out what came next professionally, which was a question he had set aside during the more urgent questions and was only now beginning to approach. He ran every morning. He called Pete Ockhaffer, a friend from his second deployment, living in Savannah now, who had called when the news broke and had said, "Whatever you need," with the specific simplicity of someone who meant it. They talked twice a week. Pete had a particular gift for conversation that didn't require resolution, that could hold complicated things without insisting they be simplified, and Ryan was grateful for that in a way he hadn't expected to be. He did not call his family. His mother had written once, a letter, handwritten, sent to Marcus's office because she did not have Ryan's hotel address. Marcus had described it, apology, explanation, the language of a woman constructing a narrative in which her actions remained comprehensible to herself. Ryan had told Marcus to hold it. Ashley had sent a text in November that said, "I hope you know I never wanted this to happen." He had read it once and not responded. His father had called twice. Both times Ryan had looked at the name and let it ring. He was not ready to know what to do with his father yet. Harold Walker existed in a category that didn't map cleanly onto anger or forgiveness. The category of a man who had chosen silence when silence was a choice that cost someone else, and who was genuinely remorseful, Ryan believed, in the way that passive people are remorseful, fully, uselessly, after. He was not ready for that conversation. He thought he might be, eventually. Not yet. Marcus called on a Thursday in February. "It's done," he said. "Title transfers tomorrow morning. The Cho family's attorney confirmed. You can take possession Friday afternoon." Ryan sat at the desk in his hotel room. He looked at the wall. "Friday," he said. 2 o'clock, Marcus said. "I'll meet you there." Ryan thanked him. He ended the call. He sat at the desk for a while. He had thought about this moment many times, the abstract version of it, the legal resolution, the return of what had been taken. He had held it in front of him during the difficult parts of the past year as the thing he was working toward. And now it was Thursday, and the thing was happening on Friday, and he sat in his hotel room and felt the complicated reality of an anticipated moment arriving. He thought about the east kitchen window. He thought about the morning light. He thought about whether that light was still there, whether the Cho family had changed something, whether something in the house had shifted in the year and a half since he had stood in it, whether the version of the house that existed now matched the version he had been carrying in his memory through Kandahar and the hotel rooms and the courtroom. He thought about whether it mattered if it matched. He went for a long run. He came back. He packed his bag. The Cho family had left the keys with their attorney. Marcus handed them to Ryan outside the house on Friday afternoon. The February air was cold and clear, the sky the specific pale blue of southern winter, the neighborhood quiet in the early afternoon way of a street where most people were at work. Ryan stood on the sidewalk in front of the house. He looked at it. It was the same house. The same brick, the same porch, the same east-facing kitchen window visible from the driveway. The porch was not the green he had painted it. The Cho family had repainted it a different color, a muted blue-gray that was not wrong, exactly, just different. The yard had been maintained. Susan Cho had, apparently, done something with the flower beds that Ryan had never gotten around to addressing. It was his house. It looked like someone else had been living in it. Both of these things were true simultaneously. Marcus stood beside him. "Take your time," Marcus said. Ryan walked to the door. He put the key in the lock. He turned it. The door opened. The interior was empty. The Cho family had moved out the previous week, taking everything, leaving the house in the clean, bare state of a property being transferred. Floors swept, walls clear, the specific neutral blankness of a space between occupants. He stood in the hallway. He looked at the wall at the end of it. No drawings, no mirror, just wall. He thought about the child's drawings he had seen taped there on the day he knocked on his own door like a stranger. He thought about the little girl who had asked why a stranger was on the porch, who had asked her mother about the soldier months later, who had said she hoped he found somewhere nice to live. He walked down the hallway. He stood in the living room. Different paint. The Chos had done the walls a warm off-white, which was not what Ryan had had, but which was not bad. The floors were the same floors, the ones he had refinished himself the month before deployment, and he looked at them with the specific recognition of work you have done with your own hands. He walked to the kitchen. He stood in the doorway. The kitchen was not the same kitchen, not dramatically different. The layout was the same. The dimensions were the same. The east-facing window was there where it had always been. But the Cho family had done something to the cabinets. A paint or refinish that changed their color from the white he remembered to a soft sage green. And the countertops had been replaced at some point. And the general feeling of the room was different in the way that a room feels different when someone else has lived in it and left their sensibility behind. He walked to the window. He stood at the east window and looked at the backyard. The light was February light, thinner than he remembered because his memory of this window was from summer, from the morning he had stood here with the keys and thought, "This is mine." The February light was different. Less certain, more provisional. He stood in it anyway. He put his hand, flat on the counter beside the window. He thought about everything that had happened between the last time he had stood here and now. The deployment, the plane landing, the little girl at the door, Gerald in the clerk's office, the hotel rooms, Marcus, Agent Ray's, the courtroom, Margaret Howell's voice, his mother's voice on the recording. He thought about $412,000 and 11 forged signatures, and an 81-year-old woman who had notarized 32 years of trust into a crime. He stood in his kitchen in the February light. He breathed. Marcus appeared in the doorway. "The utilities are transferred," he said. "Everything's in your name as of today." A pause. "How are you doing?" Ryan looked at the window. "It's different," he said. "It's been lived in," Marcus said. "It'll become yours again." Ryan thought about that, the specific process by which a space becomes yours. The accumulation of ordinary time in it, the particular mark that daily life makes on a place. The way a house becomes a home not through ownership, but through inhabitation. He thought about the work ahead. Not legal work, the other kind. "Yeah," he said, "it will." He turned away from the window. He walked through the rest of the rooms, the 2 bedrooms, the bathroom, the small room at the back he had used as a study, and which was now empty and full of afternoon light. He walked through them the way you walk through something you are in the process of reclaiming, slowly, with attention. He came back to the living room. He stood in the empty room and looked at the walls and the floor and the ceiling and the light coming in, and all the bare potential of a space that had been something, and was becoming something again. He thought about what he wanted to put in it, not what he had lost, not the furniture that was gone or the particular arrangement he had built before deployment. Something new, something that belonged to the version of himself that had come through the past year rather than the version that had existed before it. He thought about Pete saying, "Whatever you need." He thought about running in the Atlanta mornings. He thought about February light through an east window. "I'm going to need furniture," he said. Marcus looked at him. A small thing, the most ordinary thing. But it was the first sentence Ryan had said that looked forward rather than back, and both of them understood that. "I know a place," Marcus said. He moved in over a weekend in late February. Pete drove up from Savannah with a truck and 2 days of his time, which Ryan had tried to argue against, and Pete had declined to accept as argument. They carried things in from the truck and put them in rooms and rearranged them, and carried them out and put them somewhere else, and drank bad coffee and ate takeout on the floor of the living room, because the table wasn't assembled yet, and it was, without being announced as such, the first time in 18 months that Ryan had spent time somewhere that felt like somewhere. Not the house specifically, the company. He thought about that in the evenings after Pete had gone back to Savannah, about the specific warmth of a friend's presence, and what it had given him, and what that said about what he needed. He had been alone for a long time. Not isolated. There had been Marcus, Agent Reyes, the various people of the legal process. But alone in the particular way of someone who had lost the structure that made daily life feel inhabited. He was going to need to build that structure again. He thought about it. He thought about what he wanted. He had not spent much time in the past year thinking about what he wanted, as distinct from what he needed to do. The legal work had consumed the wanting space. Now that it was receding, the space was there again, and he was beginning to learn what to put in it. He found a job, contract security consulting, which used what he knew and which could be done partly from home, partly from wherever. He had flexibility. He had not had flexibility before and was not entirely sure what to do with it, which was its own small revelation. He fixed the yard. It took 3 weekends. He had been planning to fix it before he deployed and had not gotten to it, and the Cho family had maintained it but not improved it, and he worked on it now with the focused physical pleasure of outdoor work in late winter, the specific satisfaction of soil and effort, and a visible result. He painted the porch. He chose a different green than before, darker, more deliberate. He stood back when it was done and looked at it and thought it was right. Not the same as before, right for now. He was making the house his again. The way Marcus had said. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in March. He saw the handwriting on the envelope before he saw the return address, and he knew what it was. His mother's handwriting. The same hand that had signed his name 11 times on documents that had cost him a year of his life. He stood at the mailbox. He looked at the envelope. The return address was not Dalton. It was an address he didn't recognize. He looked it up later, out of a specific need to know, and found it was a federal correctional facility in Georgia. She had written from there. He stood at the mailbox with the letter in his hand. He thought about what was inside it. He had thought about this before, had thought about what she would say when she wrote, what shape the explanation would take, how she would frame what she had done from inside a federal facility with the full weight of its consequences around her. He had thought about all the versions. He thought about opening it. He stood with it for a while. The street was quiet. The February sun was gone now. It was fully March, warmer, the first suggestions of spring in the air, the specific shift of southern late winter into something that was almost not winter anymore. He stood at his mailbox in the early morning and held his mother's letter and felt the full weight of everything it represented. He thought about what he wanted, not what was right, not what was reasonable, not what a therapist would recommend, or what Marcus would advise, or what any external standard would suggest was the appropriate response. What he wanted. He wanted to not carry this anymore. He wanted to stand at his own mailbox on his own street and feel the spring air and not have the weight of her explanation in his hands. And he understood that opening the letter would not remove the weight but would instead add to it, would give him new words to sit with, new reframings to evaluate, new versions of I did it because, and I want you to understand. And I hope someday that he would have to process and file and decide what to do with. He did not want to do that. He was not ready to do that. He might never be ready to do that. And that, he had come to understand, was an acceptable outcome. He took a pen from his jacket pocket. He turned the envelope over. On the back, in letters that were deliberate and clear and final, he wrote 2 words. Return to sender. He put the letter back in the mailbox. He raised the flag. He walked back to the house. He stood on the porch that evening. The sun was going down behind the houses across the street, the specific southern sunset of early March, warm colors, arriving earlier than you expect them, the light going from gold to amber, to the deep particular orange of a sky that has decided to be generous on its way out. He stood on the green-painted porch of his house. His house, not the house he had left before the deployment, not that version, which existed now only in memory and in the specific weight of what had been done to it while he was gone. Not the house the Cho family had lived in, which he was grateful for, and which was already becoming something else in his mind. The kindness of Susan Cho's letter already folded into the history of this place, rather than sitting apart from it. This house, the one he was living in now, with its sage green kitchen cabinets, and its different porch color, and its refinished floors, and its fixed yard, and the furniture he had chosen for a version of himself that had come through something. He stood on it and looked at the street and thought about nothing specific. That was new. For most of the past 18 months, standing still had meant standing still with something, with the documents, with the recordings, with the legal timeline, with the specific questions that required answering, and the specific people who required accountability. Standing still had always been standing still with the case. Now he stood still with nothing. Just the street. Just the evening. Just the porch of his house in March, with the last light going gold across the rooftops. He breathed in. He breathed out. He thought about the flag on the mailbox, raised, with his mother's letter inside it. He thought about the mail carrier coming in the morning, and taking it, and the system doing what the system did, and the letter going back the way it came. He thought about that. He felt something in his chest that had been tight for a very long time release, by some small degree. Not all the way. Not in one evening. But some. He thought about Ashley's text. I never wanted this to happen. He thought about his father's voice on the phone, calling twice into the silence. He thought about Harold's face in the family dining room, the face of a man carrying something heavy and not knowing how to set it down. He thought about all of it. He thought about what he wanted to do with all of it. He did not have a complete answer. He thought he might, eventually, find the words for a conversation with his father. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever in the form people meant when they said the word, but something. Harold was not the same as Deborah. Harold was not the same as Ashley and Trevor. Harold was a man who had made a specific kind of failure, the failure of silence, and Ryan was not ready to excuse it, and was also not ready to write it off entirely, and the space between those two positions was where things stood. He was going to let it stand there for now. He thought about Margaret Howell. He had written her a letter, 3 months ago, brief, thanking her for her testimony. She had written back 2 sentences. I told the truth. I hope you're all right. He had put the letter in the drawer of his desk. He thought about Pete driving up from Savannah with a truck, and 2 days of his time. He thought about Susan Cho writing 2 pages in her own hand to say, we don't want to live in a house that was taken from someone. He thought about the specific texture of this year, the betrayal at the center of it, enormous and real and not diminished by any of what had followed, and around that center, at the edges, the other things. The people who had shown up. The people who had told the truth. The small, unexpected kindnesses of strangers who had no obligation to him and had chosen it anyway. He thought about that. He stood on his porch. The light was almost gone now. Just the last edge of it. The specific color that has no name. The color that exists for about 3 minutes between sunset and dark. The color that makes ordinary streets look briefly like something from a dream. He stood in it. He thought about a staff sergeant who had stepped off a plane 14 months into an absence and gone to the address he had memorized in his sleep and found a stranger's child at the door. He thought about that man and what he had done with what he found, the methodical work of it, the discipline, the refusal to be destroyed by what had been done to him. He thought about what that man had now. A house. A porch painted a darker green than before. A kitchen with sage cabinets, and a window that faced east. A yard that was fixed. A flag on the mailbox, raised. A friend who drove 3 hours with a truck, because that was what you did. An evening in March with the last light on it. He thought about what that was worth. He thought it was worth a great deal. He stood on his porch until the light was gone and the street went quiet, and the temperature dropped the specific few degrees that meant the day was over and the evening had arrived. And then he went inside. He closed the door behind him. He turned on the kitchen light. The sage green cabinets. The east window, dark now, reflecting the kitchen back at itself. He filled the kettle. He set it to boil. He stood in his kitchen and listened to the water heat and thought about tomorrow morning, the light coming through the east window, the specific quality of it, the thing he had been carrying in his memory for almost 2 years. He was going to see it in the morning. Just the morning light. Just his kitchen. Just his. The kettle boiled. He made his tea. He sat at his table. Outside, the street was quiet and the mailbox flag was raised, and somewhere in the system, a letter was making its way back to where it came from. And Ryan Walker sat in the kitchen of his house and drank his tea in the silence and felt, for the first time in a very long time, that the silence was entirely his own.